Welcome to Water Talk with Paul the Waterman, brought to you by Water Pros. Paul the Waterman is Colorado's expert on all things related to the water we use and drink in our homes. Have you ever thought about where your water actually comes from? Is it safe to drink? Is it harmful to my health, my skin, or my hair? Paul the Waterman knows water, and he has the answers. So get ready to talk to the Waterman yourself right now. Call in with your questions to talk with your host, Paul the Waterman.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. I'm glad to be here with you today, and I appreciate you listening. So I wanted to reach out and do some research, and we mentioned last week pharmaceuticals in our water. What about the extent of pharmaceutical contamination? Because that's a big, big concern for me. I think it's, vastly underreported. I don't think there's been enough studies to really, determine what the true effect is regarding pharmaceutical contamination. And so that's what we're going to cover today. But before that, I want to kind of talk about recent events, what I've seen. And one of the things that I've noticed is especially northern Colorado, you go up by Greeley and then go out east to Alt, we're seeing a lot of high iron content in well water. And, iron is normally, it's clear water iron, it's called ferrous iron. And when iron oxidizes, just like hardness, now remember hardness is called calcium carbonate, they're both in solution or in liquid form, and then when air comes in contact, they oxidize and convert to a solid. And hardness and iron work hand in hand together because they both create staining. And sometimes I like to associate hard water as being the paint. The iron is like the pigment or the color of the paint, right? And as the hardness builds up, so does the iron content. And most likely, the iron gets a deeper, darker red the more the buildup is. So the hardness basically traps the iron in layers. And most people, because it's a rock, that's what hard water is, it's a scale in the buildup, use a harmful cleaner called CLR, and that's an acid. And it's an acid that dissolves rock. It dissolves the calcium buildup. But that also can be harmful to your septic system. It can absolutely kill the bacteria that's helpful, that's needed in a septic system, especially during long-term exposure to CLR. But it's something that when you use CLR, you have to have rubber gloves, a mask, and eye protection because it's something that can be extremely harmful if it's, gets on your skin or, you don't want to breathe that in or, heaven forbid, get a drop of that in your eye. So you have to wear protective gear. So a lot of our competitors recommend single tank iron filtration systems. Some of them call them iron busters, and I want to talk about that real quick. Iron busters or iron filters, any kind of single tank filtration system does two things. One, what type of water, this is a quiz for everybody out there, okay? What type of water is used in a single tank iron filter to clean the system? That's right. It is the same dirty water. So when you're using the same dirty water, how effective are you going to be? Secondly, let's talk about the filtration media that's used in these iron filters. There's three main types. One of them is green sand. Now, green sand is extremely heavy. It's over 100 pounds per cubic foot. So what does that mean, extremely heavy? All right. So the control valves that sit on top of these filter systems, they're not a pump. All they do is monitor water usage, and they adjust the water flow to create pressure. So they don't pump water into the unit. Water flows in, water flows out. When they go through the rinsing stage, they take the same water pressure that's provided to it by the well. Water flow rate and water pressure are two different things, remember that. And they send it through a smaller hole to create that pressure. And so the theory is that if they take a bunch of high-pressured water and bounce it through the filtration system, it bounces off the media. It creates a splash effect. And so they're thinking that all the oxidized iron inside that filter will eventually be splashed, lifted up, and sent down the drain. But what really happens is that the iron settles through to the bottom and it accumulates. If you had a berm iron filter, berm is another thing that is a very heavy filter media used, same premises. And each one of the first two they use, they try to do what's called air induction. So they want to inject air into the system thinking they're going to oxidize the iron, but it doesn't happen that way. You don't instantaneously oxidize the iron. So if anybody has any questions, raise your hand and I'll get to you. So what that means is that if it's the same process, different media, where, the iron, in a sense, how the iron really oxidizes in those filter systems is when the water sits and it's stagnant. Because ferrous iron oxidizes. All you got to do is go to your bathroom. For those on well water with iron problems, go to the bathroom, pull the lid off the toilet tank, where the holding water is in that tank, and you'll see all the iron discoloration. You'll see it build up in layers. In some cases, it's slimy. In some cases, it even has floaties on top. That's iron bacteria. And so that tells you right there that iron oxidizes. And it also tells you that the current iron filter you're using clearly isn't working. So the same thing happens inside those filter tanks. Iron oxidizes as water sits. So then when you turn the faucet on, you're drawing water. Then all that iron gets trapped within that media, and eventually it works its way to the bottom of the tank. And so in most cases, you get a higher iron bleed through from your iron buster system than you do your well. A higher iron bleed through occurs. And once iron oxidizes and it converts to a solid, it becomes a slimy, sticky mess. And that's where it starts staining everything, staining the tile in the bathtub and the shower, staining the toilets, causing havoc in the wash machine. The third filtration system is a filter media that is called oxide. And that's something that is like a coarse media. It's effective at removing iron in the very beginning, but the same problem occurs as when you're backwashing using the same dirty water. Think about that. Backwashing using the same dirty water. The iron is going to oxidize during the backwashing process, but how effective are you really? So any kind of filtration system, when you're in well water with high iron content, and high iron content is anything that measures over a half part per million. A single tank water softener has problems with iron content above a half part per million because the same thing, a single tank softener has no choice but to use the same dirty water during the backwashing process. So what we do is we introduce a dual tank resin system. Now, water softening resin loves ferrous iron. It grabs the iron before it oxidizes, so the resin will grab the hardness and it grabs the iron content out of the water. But what you have to do is program the filtration system or the water softening system, dual tank system, to backwash either based on usage, right? But with high iron content, you really don't want to do that. You want to figure out the amount of iron that's in the water and then think, okay, how many days based upon that iron content do we need to backwash? Because remember, iron will oxidize. As it sets, it's in the water, it's going to oxidize. And once iron oxidizes, game over. Even a dual tank water softener won't filter it out because once iron comes out of solution, it'll pass right through the resin. So the key on a dual tank system is to keep the resin active. So most likely you want to backwash once a day. And what we do differently then is that with the dual tank system, you're taking clean water from one tank to backflush the other tank. And so while using clean water, you use less water softening salt and less water actually because it's clean water that you're using, so it doesn't require as much. The rinsing cycles don't need to be that long because we're using clean water. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the other thing that we talk about a lot for folks on well water is, we talk about the pump, the well pump. And when you have a single tank filtration system that's designed to, it says it's designed to get iron out, and when iron accumulates inside that filtration system, it creates resistance. So the well pump has to pump against resistance. And a well pump remember, they're not designed to push against resistance. They love free-flowing water. And when all that iron debris builds up on the bottom and it's out of solution, that's where the heaviest staining can occur. And then the other thing that happens is if you have a filter system that's not maintained properly, and this is something that they don't tell you, is when you have an iron, is it green sand, even berm, that filtration media has to be replaced. It doesn't last forever. So that's the other issue, is that you don't replace that frequently, and then you just get a big accumulation, and you have a holding tank. The filtration tank, that fiberglass tank, basically becomes a holding tank for oxidized iron. And that's where you see the drain line is all stained in iron, because when it backwashes, it's all full of that ferrous iron that's oxidized, and that's where the heavy staining comes from. But it also builds up and stays inside those tanks. So if you have well water, you're seeing, if you have a current iron filtration system, and some of them, if they use a potassium permanganate as a regenerant, well, that's poison. And that's definitely something that I wouldn't recommend using, and you really don't want that going down your septic system. The theory is that you hope the iron content outweighs, that potassium permanganate that you're using, and it won't, it'll, instead of settling in the septic tank, it'll go off into the leach field. But what really, happens, in my opinion, is the iron gets so thick that it's going to, treat like human waste in a septic system, where it's going to float to the bottom of the tank. And that's where we can, have that contamination with that potassium permanganate in your bacteria. And the same when you're using CLR as a cleaner in trying to clean up the hard water stains and the iron stains. That's another thing that can occur. So I just wanted to mention that a dual tank water softener absolutely will take care of both the hardness and the iron content. And I feel bad for folks that, have that single tank solution, because, how many out there have multiple single tank filters? They have one for iron and they have one for the smell in the water. And that's the other problem. High iron content can create a sulfur smell or a rotten egg smell. So folks think you have sulfur in the water, but really it's the iron that's creating that, it's creating it because of the buildup that's in the pipes and the hot water heaters. So we're going to take our first commercial break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into the pharmaceuticals.
If you have hard water, smelly water, or water that just tastes bad, improve the quality of your water with the professionals at Water Pros. Water is a precious resource that's a part of everyday life. Harmful cleaners, forever chemicals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals end up in our water supply, and they don't just magically disappear. Water treatment should not cost tens of thousands of dollars or require long-term financing. For KLZ listeners, a complete Water Pros water treatment system start at only $31.95 installed. See why people are trusting the professionals with Water Pros. Water Pros is a family-owned and veteran-owned business dedicated to providing you the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test, or call 303-862-5554. That's 303-862-5554. And ask for the KLZ listener special. $31.95 for a whole house water softener and point of use reverse osmosis.
What's in your water? Are you unknowingly drinking hormones, antibiotics, or dangerous chemicals? Paul the Waterman here from Water Pros. Now is the time to have our professionals help you with affordable solutions to be sure your water is free from those contaminants. Call Water Pros today and visit waterpros.net. Toxic chemicals and bacteria last forever in your water if untreated. It's a crucial time to think about the quality of your water to be sure it's safe for you and your family. Call Water Pros today or go to waterpros.net.
The EPA is making changes in regulations for water safety because of elevated levels of lead, Gen X, and forever chemicals in water supplies. Locally owned and operated Water Pros has home treatment solutions ready to install today. Water Pros employs the latest technologies and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water, lead in your water, and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary test and consultation now, waterpros.net.
This is 560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. Okay, let's get right in this. Are drugs in my drinking water? So trace amounts of pharmaceuticals and drugs, basically the same thing, right? Pharmaceuticals and drugs, can be found in drinking water due to wastewater contamination, improper disposal or runoff. Studies have detected low levels of medication like antidepressants, antibiotics, and hormones in water supplies, often in a parts per trillion or parts per billion. So let's remember this number. We've learned about this parts per billion and parts per trillion, haven't we? And do you remember where we first heard this from? That's right. We heard it from the PFAS contamination, where they started out saying, okay, in parts per billion, and then they went down to parts per trillion and eventually said, nope, zero, don't want any of it in there. But that's when we first heard of this, is parts per billion to parts per trillion. Okay, the EPA regulates water quality, but they really don't regulate drugs. I don't think they test for drugs. And in my opinion, there's no way at a waste treatment plant are they monitoring prescription drug levels. Treatment plants can't filter prescription drugs. That's something that's very important, and we're going to have a clip that mentions that. Health risks from levels are generally considered low, but long-term effects aren't fully studied. So when they say the health effects are considered low, well, here's the thing. I think that's based on, it's a guesstimation, that's a new word. How much water does somebody really drink? Do you drink a lot of water? How many people drink a lot of water at home if they don't have a water filtration system? That's what they're thinking. But you have to consider this. The more water you drink, then I would think that the contamination level is going to build up. And here's the something. What if you have those Insta-Hot machines? And so as water is flowing through, that's where you can get your measurement. But if you have a gallon and a half of water storage in an Insta-Hot machine where people use to make quick cup of tea or soups, then is that going to build up? And over a period of time, does that, count for total exposure? Because the total exposure is that water is used in food, and then as we use that in the food process, is that going to build up based upon the food that we eat, and then also on top of the water that we drink? And then the other thing is to consider is long-term exposure. How long does that medication stay in your body? So to check for specific, on your specific water supply, they say look up your local water quality report. It's often available on the utilities website. Well, I've seen water quality reports, and how many out there, raise your hand, how many out there have seen pharmaceuticals listed in their water quality report? Anybody? I haven't seen one. Luke, have you seen a water quality? Luke hasn't seen one. So, that's something that, is suspect right there. If you consider using a reverse osmosis filter system or activated carbon filter, which can reduce some contaminants. Now, an activated carbon filter can reduce some contaminants, but not pharmaceuticals. So the only thing that really will remove pharmaceuticals is a point-of-use reverse osmosis, which WaterPros offers. We want to go to key points. Research suggests hormones. This is huge. Hormones like estrogen can be found in drinking water at low levels. It seems like these common pharmaceuticals, wastewater, in agricultural runoffs, the evidence leans towards minimal health risks at current concentrations, but long-term effects are unclear. So I think that's another thing, is that long-term effects are unclear. So agricultural runoff, what does that mean? I'm not going to be gross, but I just have to tell you the facts. Agricultural runoff means when they take the animal manure and they spread it on their fields for fertilizer, and it rains. Because we know that there's antibiotics in our animal products, right? They give antibiotics to the beef cows that we eat and to the pork. So that's something that it goes through the animal, that's animal runoff. The presence of hormones such as estrogen, androgens, and testosterone can be present in the drinking water, typically at very low concentrations. Again, they're talking about parts per trillions. These hormones include 17B estradiol, testosterone, and again, that progesterone, among others. They enter water systems through sources like human and animal waste, again, pharmaceutical and agricultural runoff. So we're being a little bit repetitive here, but the key is that it's in the water. And the agricultural runoff, again, agricultural runoff is from the manure that's used to spread on the fields. That's just exactly what it is. So, what can we do? Again, we can insist that the water quality report test for pharmaceuticals. I would call your local utility company that provides you your water and ask them, hey, do you test for pharmaceuticals? And if not, will you do so? And the problem is finding a lab that's going to be, able to do it for them, because we know right now the state of Colorado does not test for water. Why? Because the lab got shut down because they had lab techs that fudge numbers. Why would you have lab techs fudge numbers? Why even do that? Can we play the first clip?
Well, do you know what's in your drinking water? A shocking Associated Press investigation found various pharmaceuticals in the drinking supplies of at least 41 million Americans. Tainted water was found from New Jersey to California. NBC's Tom Costello is following the story from Washington. Tom, I've been dying to ask somebody some questions about this story. First of all, what kinds of drugs are we talking about, and how dangerous is this?
Pretty wide range. Here's the drinking water in Washington, D.C. They found 6 pharmaceuticals in our drinking water here. They include ibuprofen, caffeine, monosin, and about 3 or 4 others. In Philadelphia, they had 56 pharmaceuticals or byproducts. They range everything from epilepsy medication to mental health medicines to pharmaceuticals that really run the gamut. Here's the bottom line from the Associated Press on the study they did. It was, as you mentioned, a 5-month investigation involving the AP investigative team. 50 major cities in 50 states were looked at, and drugs were found in the water of 24 major cities. We're talking 41 million Americans here who drink that water. So what's in the water? Everything from acetaminophen and ibuprofen to mood stabilizers, antibiotics, angina, heart, as well as cholesterol drugs, and even sex hormones. The trouble here, Meek, is that the federal government does not test specifically for pharmaceuticals in the water. And in fact, there is no way to scrub water that is in a...
There you go, right there. It said no way to scrub water that's in the waste treatment plants. There's the truth. So it's something that we really need to take seriously, ladies and gentlemen, because right there, those are the facts. There's no way to scrub it. See, I think they're not being truthful, because this is going to create an alarming concern when we know what's really in our drinking water.
In the water. And in fact, there is no way to scrub water that is in a treatment plant for pharmaceuticals. And so now we have a situation where states and cities across the country are just starting to realize that there are the remnants of pharmaceuticals in the drinking water. All of that said, we should emphasize, we're talking here about parts per billion or trillion, really minute traces of pharmaceuticals that are in the water. And you say, well, how did it get there? Well, without getting too graphic, all of us who take medication for one thing or another, we don't absorb all of it. It is excreted. It gets into the sewage system, into the water treatment plants. And then, because water treatment plants can't scrub it all out, if any of it, it just kind of dilutes on into the water system. Sometimes it gets into the water table, into wildlife, and then into reservoirs. It goes back into the water treatment site, into the water treatment plants.
I wonder if there's going to be, long-term study about effects of this down the road. And, but I guess initially, Tom, the question I'm sure you're asking today is there anything the government can do about this?
Yeah, and the EPA says it's concerned about it, but we don't yet know, and water treatment utility plants say they are convinced that there is no immediate threat to anybody out there. That said, I did a story about 4 years ago in which we found a river in Colorado, and now we know there are many rivers, in which the fish were turning from male to female. And the reason was because there was too much estrogen in the water. The natural female hormone was literally turning male fish into female fish, and the thinking was that this is a canary in a coal mine. So now the question is, what's the impact on humans?
Yeah, that's the next one. Tom Costello on this story from Washington. Thank you very much.
You bet.
I'll tell you what, if I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm a woman, I'm going to be really mad. because this is not funny. I try to joke about it, but a river in Colorado where fish are going from male to female. Folks, how else can we state the obvious? Is that this is a serious situation. Everybody should consider using a point of use reverse osmosis for their drinking water for all the contamination that we've been talking about, on this show. It's something to really take seriously. But with hormones, see, here, Tom Costello said something, and then he clarified. He said, well, it's in a part per trillion, part per billion. So we covered that, right? Where that came from. That's PFAS contamination. So PFAS is synthetic forever chemical that doesn't disappear. When PFAS gets in wastewater, it wants to bond and reconnect. But it's in a part per trillion or part per billion that's too dangerous for human consumption. So when you get a pharmaceutical, now remember this. Remember, we had a gentleman that we interviewed that designs and engineers water reservoirs. And brand new water reservoir, they engineered, they filled it up, we're filling it up with water. They did a biological test, and every major over-the-counter pharmaceutical medication tested in the water supply, positive in the water supply. That's your Tylenol, that's your ibuprofen, over-the-counter pain medication, acetaminophen. And antidepressant medication. And so estrogen is something that is in there mainly because of birth control medication. But what I'm concerned about are other hormones, and testosterone is the number I'm really concerned about is the puberty blockers that people choose to take because they want to augment their body chemistry. So when you take a medication that's opposite of who you are, the body's going to look at that as a foreign substance and automatically want to get rid of it. It's absolutely going to get rid of it. I mean, the liver and the kidneys are going to be doing everything they can to filter that out because it doesn't belong. And so think about this. The amount of medication that someone would have to take is at a high level, but to affect the change of the body. So that means that how much of that is being expelled right into the water supply. Okay, let's take a commercial. We'll be right back.
Forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine are real contaminants in our water. Clean water is essential for our everyday life. Water is the best flushing agent our bodies can use. We cook with water, we bathe in water, and we grow our food with water. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation. Water Pros can educate you about the concerns of forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine, and discuss ways to remove these contaminants from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net to request your free in-home consultation. Water Pros is a family-owned, veteran-owned business dedicated to offering the best solutions to meet the needs of the water concerns we have today. Call 303-862-5554 today or at www.waterpros.net.
With forever chemicals in your water, it's crucial to think about the quality of your water. Paul the Waterman here for Water Pros. Be sure your water is safe with affordable solutions from Water Pros. Visit waterpros.net today.
Colorado's residents are known for healthy lifestyles, outdoor living, and clean organic eating. 100% Colorado-owned and operated Water Pros provide affordable in-home water treatment options. Water Pros can help you with hard water, lead, and forever chemicals in your drinking water. Living organic means eating organic, and eating organic starts with clean water. Learn more about your water and schedule your free consultation today. Waterpros.net. Water Pros. Healthy water means a healthier you.
You're listening to 560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman, coming to you live at the Powerhouse KLZ 560 studios. Research indicates that hormones, particularly estrogen, and forgive me, folks, I can read it, but my tongue just doesn't want to say it. Androgens or testosterone, progestrogens, compounds like bisphenol are detectable in drinking water. A 2024 study, now this is recent, A 2024 study published in Environmental Science and Pollution Research highlighted that estrogens, now this is in parentheses, so I'm assuming these are types of estrogen, estrogens E1, E2, E3, and double E2 are among the most common, often found in concentrations in a part per trillion range. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, monitors these substances under the Unregulated Contamination Monitoring Rule, or UCMR. Now, did you know that? Because I didn't. We just learned something. These are monitored under the Unregulated Contamination Monitoring Rule. So what that means, folks, is that basically maybe they're unregulated because they really don't want us to know about them. Are they unregulated because if we knew exactly what the levels were, it would be alarming, or the side effects or the hazards to our health? Is that why it's still unregulated? Remember the contaminant we talked about a couple weeks ago, 1,4-dioxane, which is a forever chemical, which has been around since the 1890s, is still an unregulated contaminant. So if they can monitor this, then why don't they publish it? All right. Using methods like the U.S. EPA Method 539, which specifies detection of various hormones through advanced technologies such as solid phase extraction or liquid chromatography or electrospray ionization. So they have the means to do it. How many stories did we read where they said that they haven't been tested yet, or this is still brand spanking new? Well, guess what? This just proves that they have been tested. So what's the truth information, EPA? What is really going on with their water? And then how come we don't have a chance to read about it through the water quality report? Want to know why? Because it's unregulated. And if it's unregulated, what does that mean? They don't have to test for it. So now we have a new game plan. Do we need to call our congressmen, our state representatives, and say, make these contaminants in their water supply regulated so then they can be tested? They should be tested for? A 2019 study in the Environmental Science and Technology conducted a large-scale assessment across the U.S. finding at least one hormone or pharmaceutical in 5.9% of public supply sites and 11.3% of domestic supply sites with bisphenol and hydrocortisone detected above certain thresholds. These findings underscore widespread, a bit low-level presence of hormones. So, but low level of presence of hormones, pardon me. So I pause a little bit because I'm shocked because I'm reading this. So in a sense, because it's let's just do a quick recap. Because it's an unregulated contaminant, they use the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. So what that means is that the municipalities, we kind of answered our own question. The municipalities do not test for these things because it's not a regulated contaminant. So that means that the PFAS, or forever chemicals, are a regulated contaminant, so they must test for them. Remember, last year, the EPA came up with new rules, standards, and guidelines that are forcing municipalities to send letters to communities where the forever chemical levels are above the EPA recommended threshold. This started... this whole process of us talking about the forever chemicals started when people received letters in Adams County and Denver. That's what really got me on this. And then I started listening to the webinars that the EPA was hosting regarding forever chemical contamination, the effects. And then we started doing, programs where we played clips from shows regarding the true effect of what the forever chemicals did to families, and especially in the farms. And back in how long this was happening from DuPont and 3M, and back in the 70s when they first started testing the workers and started seeing that the workers had forever chemicals in their blood. So now, because that's a regulated contaminant, now we just found out right here live on Water Talk, answered the question that I asked earlier. is that the reason why is that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency monitors these substances under its unregulated contamination monitoring rule. So I guess what we have to do is insist that these contaminants become a regulated contaminant, so then it's something that it becomes public knowledge. I think that's the only way we're going to be able to see if you have these contaminations, like 1,4-dioxane that they're starting to talk about, but still an unregulated contaminant. So what that means is how many unregulated contaminants are there that are harmful to our health that we don't know about? And then just because it's a measurement of part per billion or part per trillion, ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't mean that it's not harmful to us, because again, I'm being repetitive here, the PFAS contamination was first measured at a part per billion. Then it went down to 4 part per trillion, and now it's at 0. So this is something that we're going to have to start at a grassroots level and, contact the powers that be, and we got to get this changed. Who has a direct line to Robert F. Kennedy? Anybody out there? Can you guys call him or email him and say, hey, we need this changed? Next time President Trump's in town, can somebody, Scott, President Trump, can you go talk to him and say, hey, Mr. President, hormones that enter the drinking water through, multiple pathways of pharmaceutical use. So basically, oral contraceptives contribute to significantly with human urine containing hormones like estrogen. A 2011 report in Environmental Science and Technology clarified that birth control pills account for less than 1% of estrogens, with major sources including natural estrogen from soy, dairy, and animal waste used in farm fertilizers. So we talked about that. Most estrogen in drinking water is not from the pill, so that's good. So that's good news. Wastewater treatment plants would have low separation efficiency, and aquaculture also releases hormones. As noted in the 2024 study, agricultural runoff from animal husbandry operations further contribute, especially in areas near watersheds. So this just reiterates that, the practice of fertilization, taking animal waste and spreading it on the fields to fertilize your crops, and when it rains, that's part of the issue right there, contamination. I want us to really think about this. Do we really know the health risks associated with hormones in our drinking water or other pharmaceutical contamination in the drinking water? We don't, especially when it's an unregulated contaminant. We have others. There's steroids that is alternating here. It says right here, alternating sex steroids, hormone levels, endocrine disruptors in the water and their effects. We don't know what that is. So the EPA, the World Health Organization, have set acceptable daily intakes for estrogen, with the WHO, World Health Organization, deriving that an ADI, acceptable daily intake, that's what ADI is, it's based on, they base it upon, body weight and height, is for about 60 kilograms for an adult, based on, they take in 60 kilograms an average adult, and they saw no adverse effects. However, the stew effect, potential interactions from trace chemicals remain under study, with concerns about the cumulative impact on hormone responses, cancer, and male infertility. So what that just read, and I appreciate your patience with me, is what I was talking about, the cumulative effect. They have not had the numbers or done the research on what the cumulative impacts can be. And what that means is basically the buildup in the water supply and buildup in your home water supply. So I think it's really important that everybody thinks about a reverse osmosis point of view drinking water system now more than ever. Not only do we have this pharmaceutical issue, but we have the nanoplastic issue. We have the forever chemical issue that's in our water supply. We have the byproducts, the poisonous byproducts in our water simply by the sanitation of our water supply. Trihalomethanes is one of them. I was at home again this week where we did a water test from a hot water heater, and the chlorine content was actually higher coming from the hot water heater than it was from the cold water side. And it's because they use a chloramine, and so they build that up. And so remember, chloramine is something that automatically kills cells right when it gets into the body. You drink it, you're killing cells. You inhale it in the steam, you're killing cells, and it's no different than drinking swimming pool water, in my personal opinion. And other things that we found too, on a side note, with high chlorine content, eczema. Eczema absolutely can be an issue with high chlorine content. And I found that majority of women can also, have allergic reaction to high chlorine content. Skin irritation is absolutely, skin rash can be caused with high chlorine content. So we really want to think about whole house filtration. Start with, everything starts with the water softener. I encourage folks that live in town that have their water chlorinated as a disinfection measure to consider also, what we call a conditioner that can remove the hardness and remove the total chlorine content. Go to waterpros.net and check out the Echo Pro Max, because that's what that's designed for. I think with the drinking water side of things, it's just a reverse osmosis. It's just an absolute have to with everything that we're dealing with as far as contamination in the water today. So in this document I'm reading, in conclusion, hormones in drinking water are a recognized issue with low-level presence from diverse sources, and potential health impact are under study. While current risks are generally low, ongoing research and regulatory efforts aim to address uncertainties, particularly regarding long-term exposure and ecosystem impacts. Individuals can take proactive steps by reviewing local water quality and considering filtration options. So you can't review local water quality reports because a local quality report is not going to report an unregulated contaminant. And that's exactly what we just found out today, is that pharmaceuticals are in that unregulated contaminant category. And that's something that we absolutely should change. Let's take our last commercial.
Forever Chemicals in our water is now a part of our life. Forever Chemicals means that these chemicals don't break down. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation of the concerns of Forever Chemicals and the ways to remove Forever Chemicals from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net.
What's in your water? Are you concerned about drinking hormones, antibiotics, or dangerous chemicals? Paul the Waterman here from Water Pros. Don't wait to be sure your water is free from those contaminants. Have our professionals help with affordable solutions. Visit waterpros.net today.
The EPA is making changes in regulations for water safety because of elevated levels of lead, Gen X, and forever chemicals in water supplies. Locally owned and operated Water Pros has home treatment solutions ready to install today. Water Pros employs the latest technologies and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water, lead in your water, and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary test and consultation now, waterpros.net.
You're listening to KLZ 560 AM, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. So this is an article that's from the Environmental Science and Technology. Hormones and pharmaceuticals in groundwater used as a source of drinking water across the United States. A large-scale assessment of hormones and pharmaceuticals occurrence in groundwater used for drinking across the United States. They took samples from 1,091 sites. In principal, aquifers representing 60% of the volume of water pumped for drinking water supply. And the final data, 21 hormones and 103 pharmaceuticals were found. At least one compound was detected in 5.9% of 844 sites, representing the resources used for public supply across the entirety of the 15 principal aquifers. They have a map here that unfortunately I can't show you, that basically has pretty much the eastern seaboard covered into Georgia, Oklahoma, and then Illinois, all the way to Colorado, and then, of course, Nevada, California. So this is something that we absolutely need to pay attention to. Let's play our final clip.
We take these pills. They do what they can do for us in our bodies, but about 90% of the pill ends up being excreted, either through our sweat or through, when we go to the bathroom. And that excreted matter, again, whether it's sweat or otherwise, ends up getting washed through our showers, our washing machines, and our toilets back into the water supply. And per a law passed in about 50 years ago, we clean the water. We clean the water to a level that was acceptable 50 years ago. And then we put that water back into our drinking water systems, and then people pull it out of lakes and rivers and so forth. But guess what? What we haven't taken out of that water in the cleaning process, what we have not taken out, is all those pharmaceutical residues. So we are all drinking, or nearly all of us, drinking a cocktail of minute quantities of pharmaceutical products in our drinking water. That's first of all. Second of all, is America today versus 100 years ago is a much more industrial society. So we are drinking in lots and lots of chemicals, thousands of chemicals that didn't exist 100 years ago, hadn't been invented 100 years ago, that are now routinely being put into our drinking waters.
So this is something that it's a real short clip, but it just to kind of reinforce what we're talking about regarding pharmaceutical contamination. I want to recap from the opening of the show. We mentioned about iron content, so I want to thank our friend Mike who's listening, and he's correct. You can have iron staining as low as 0.2 part per million. Again, part per million. And so iron staining, so I've always said, folks, that it doesn't take a large number to have a water contamination issue. Hardness, iron, but these back to pharmaceuticals, these pharmaceuticals, especially the hormones, antibiotics, that's the other thing. Antibiotics are something that I think is a huge factor that we need to consider because of, oh my gosh, I'm going to start, and there's a thought that just hit, folks, and I think it's really urgent that we need to mention this. Nanoplastics. These pharmaceuticals can attach themselves to nanoplastics. Think about this. Nanoplastics, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we did a show on nanoplastics, and they said that a bacteria can attach itself to a nanoplastic, creates this little film, and it's an antibiotic-resistant issue. Well, what about pharmaceutical contamination? We know that nanoplastics have basically taken over every aspect of the human body, or better word, contaminated every aspect of the human body. Think about this. So if we have a certain pharmaceutical, I think it's clear to say that pharmaceuticals in the water supply can attach itself to the nanoplastics and get into our body. That's a whole new ballgame. I don't think they're even thinking about the ramifications if that occurs. If you have a buildup of pharmaceutical contamination on nanoplastics, and then we have nanoplastics that penetrate the male and female reproductive organs, there are in our brain tissue right now, they penetrate our cells. Do you think that could cause a big uh-oh? I do. Nanoplastics, I think, is a game changer when we're talking about this topic. It just occurred to me. It's like I remember talking to you folks about bacteria and the bacteria buildup in the nanoplastics and that thin film that the bacteria covered on top of a plastic, and then the antibiotic basically couldn't penetrate it, couldn't do anything about it. And now I can't help but think of all these medications out there. I mean, we have heroin in the water, cocaine in the water, methamphetamines in the water. This is a large scale. I mentioned this and I said this word before. This is a generational issue. This is something that is not going to be taken care of for generations to come, because we have to start the process of, A, how do we eliminate this? B, we need to tackle the nanoplastics in the water, point of use reverse osmosis, and then all the other contamination. Can you imagine the studying, the research that really has to be done? But I think what we really need to do is get these items off of the unregulated contamination list. That just really surprised me. Let's go back. It says the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency monitors these substances under its Unregulated Contamination Monitoring Rule, UCMR. See, how many, I'm going to do next week, we're going to find out how many bad stuff is in the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. Our crack reporter, Brittany, if you're out there listening, the next topic we need for next week's show is to find out how many unregulated contaminants we have that the EPA is monitoring under the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. This is something we have to discover. We have to figure this out. So this is big. And why is it big? Because in recap, water is life. Water is everything we do, especially summertime. We're going to be swimming in water, drinking tons of water, tons of Kool-Aid made in water, tons of lemonade, iced tea, sun tea made of water. Then we're going to use water to water our tomatoes and our cucumbers. I mean, who loves cold, crisp cucumbers in the summertime? But, they're laced with, nanoplastics, and the nanoplastics are contaminated with pharmaceuticals. So you got a headache, honey, just, eat a slice of cucumber, you'll be okay. There's enough medication in that to take care of you. This is something that it's just mind-boggling to me, the potential hazards that we have. So that's where, again, the point of use reverse osmosis for drinking water is absolutely something we should consider as a standard piece of equipment needed in our home. Just like the hot water heater, just like the furnace and the air conditioner and the box fan that's going to be used this summer, we definitely want to have the point of use reverse osmosis. So in the last couple of minutes we have, think about this. The nanoplastics are a game changer for all sorts of contamination issues because how the nanoplastics penetrate the human body. So then the nanoplastics can carry all sorts of bad stuff in the body. And then nanoplastics can also build up in fatty tissues if they're, build up in our, reproductive organs. And then they've penetrated the brain. So that's something that you can't overlook. See, there's too much of a what-if factor regarding the health and safety of our water quality. And keep in mind, the municipality plants are not designed for this kind of contamination reduction. And the other thing we learned, municipality plants, if they take anything out of the water, the wastewater that they receive, what do they do with it? And then we have human waste, which is called biosolids. That's also contaminated with PFAS, and it's probably most likely contaminated with the nanoplastics. Man, this is just mind-boggling. If you think what we have going on, it's underreported. The biggest scandal in the world today could be the illusion that our water is safe to drink. I'll say that again. The biggest scandal in the world today can be the illusion that our water is safe to drink. And think about everything else that we use with water. This summer, a lot of wine coolers are going to... Would they make wine coolers, Luke, anymore? Probably not. I'm old school, so I'm old. Okay, beer. The beer that you drink this summer could have nanoplastic contamination. Now, alcohol may kill the bugs, but the plastic's still there. But I doubt it, because if the bacteria can get on top of that nanoplastic and put a little thin film coating to protect it, holy moly, this is a game changer. It really, truly is. Call Water Pros at 303-862-5554 for your free in-home water test. I'll be more than happy to come out and talk to you guys in person and answer any questions that you have. Thank you for your time today. I enjoyed talking with you all. God bless.
Remember to reach out to Paul the Waterman with your questions and water filtration needs, and be sure to tune in to Water Talk Thursdays at 2 p.m. to talk with Paul. And for more information, find him on the programming page at klzradio.com.